Okay, well, that was I think, very enlightening and a great opportunity. And we just invite everyone to get engaged, and not only with the Granite School District, but with your own school district. And I just want to welcome everyone and wish you a happy Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is one of my very favorite holidays. And the reason is multifaceted. It's one, because we're giving thanks. It's a day to really reflect on how blessed we are, how much we have, and how we really are very, very blessed. And we have so much to be grateful for. And for those of you who are joining live, I just want to remind you are listening and watching kmmu.org. And we're live on YouTube, X, Rumble, and also our website, kmmu.org. And we're really grateful for this opportunity that we have to communicate, to stay connected with each other, and to be able to get informed and get educated on the issues. So, and this is a live program. It's also recorded, but I would invite anyone who wants to feel free to call in. We would love to have your thoughts and your calls and your input on this, and regardless of where you stand. So our number is 385-899-2134. So feel free to call in at any time. We're going to be talking about Thanksgiving and right now, but you can call about any topic that you want to. And as I said, one of the beauties of Thanksgiving is it gives us a chance to really spend a little bit more time focusing on what we have, our blessings, and what we have to be grateful for, and taking time to really thank each other, thank our Lord and Savior, our God, for the blessings He's given us, and spend more time reflecting on those blessings and spending time being with the most important part of our lives, I'm hoping, would be for everyone universally, is being with our family and our friends. But it is especially a family time, and sometimes our friends are our family. And so I love that, because our friends are really part of our family, our extended family. And it is such a great time to spend a few minutes learning about and remembering and not only reflecting, but educating each other and talking about the first Thanksgiving and those who created this great nation and who made all the blessings that we have possible for us. And I know that you all know the story of Thanksgiving and how the Puritans, the separatists, wanted so much to, not so much to be in a new land or to start a new country or to start a new community, or they did want to start a new community. They wanted to be able to worship God according to the dictates of their own conscience, and to worship God not according to the Catholic law and not according to the Church of England, but according to their own beliefs and according to the way they read and understood and interpreted the Bible. And because of that, I just want you to think, how many of us would leave our homeland, leave everything that you have and everything you know, and go across the ocean to a new land that you've never been to, that only a few people have been, and start an entirely new civilization and a new community? I just want you to imagine that as you get together with your family for Thanksgiving. Imagine the risk, the excitement and adventure, but the risk. And as you know, they had two ships. They had the Scooby and they had the Mayflower, and the Scooby was not found seaworthy, and so they had to turn back. And then only 102 members of their community ended up being able to get on the Mayflower along with the crew of the Mayflower. And they decided, and this was not exactly a new ship or new boat. I mean, this had gone twice to America, so it had happened, but it was also an old boat and wasn't very big, really, considering at the time a big ship. But they had a lot of faith. They had a lot of confidence and trusted God and entrusted in their mission. And they were willing to make sacrifices. And so I just want to ask everyone, as you celebrate Thanksgiving this year, let's ask ourselves, what kind of sacrifices are we willing to make in order to fulfill our divine missions, in order to please God, in order to do what is right, what sacrifices are we willing to make in order to have a land of liberty and freedom? Because they literally sacrificed it all. It's quite impressive. And I just feel so grateful for them. And I'm in awe of them. And I want to focus on one of the particular passengers on the Mayflower, and his name was William Bradford. He was so committed to being able to worship freely that he, as many others of the men, actually spent 30 days imprisoned in Holland in order to, because they were very upfront about their beliefs and it was contrary to what was acceptable. And they literally spent 30 days in prison, away from their families, never knowing if they would see their families again. And so, yeah, you could look back and say, well, 30 days, I could do it for 30 days. But when you get sent to prison in Holland, these people did not know if they were ever going to get out or how long it would be. They didn't know if it'd be 1 week, 2 weeks, a month, or how long it would be, maybe years. And so, again, the element of risk is pretty amazing. So another thing about William Bradford that I just have so much awe of is that he and his wife, Dorothy, they had a 3-year-old son, and they did not feel that it would be safe. They felt like it was too big of a risk to take him with them. So they left their 3-year-old son with Dorothy's mother and father until they could call for him and have him come join them. I don't know. That rips my heart out just knowing it. I don't know if I could handle it. It really is just kind of an overwhelming thought. It just is incomprehensible to me. I just could not stand to leave one of my kids behind, but I understand they felt that the peril or the risk was too great. And then on the journey over, I don't know if you know how many people survived that journey, but every one of the Puritans made it. Not one of them died, even though it took them a lot longer than they anticipated. It ended up taking 4 months, and they didn't arrive until November. But it also, they were very, very sick, and it was, didn't have enough food, didn't have the storm and the boat tossing. I mean, I just get seasick I can get seasick riding in a car, let alone being on the sea. But just being on there. But none of the Puritans, none of the Pilgrims died. They all survived. The only one to die was one of the crewmates, and it was a young man who was very vile. And he was very rude and just despicable to the Pilgrims. He was very despicable to all the religious people. And he mocked them and made fun of them, and it was very vile and disgusting to them. And he did end up getting sick and passing away on the journey. But also during one of the really, really worst storms, it was a horrible storm, and the ship was just being tossed to and fro all over. They had all the passengers go down below where they could be encapsulated, where they were safer. And I also think about the wonderful fragrance and smell of that would have been just horrific, would have been really enough to make you, feel very seasick. But one of the Pilgrims, his name was John Howland, and he stayed above board to help the mates and to help the crew. But in this huge storm where everything was being tossed around and the ship was just going back and forth and everything's just flailing, he actually fell overboard, and he went and fell into the sea. I mean, can you imagine falling into the sea and how cold and bitter? But then also in a storm where it's just entirely insane and crazy. But the big, big ropes that ships have that hang down, somehow by the grace of God, he was able to grab on to one of that rope that was dangling there. And even under the water, he was able to grab it and cling to it. And when the people above, the men on board, saw him and saw that he was able to grab the rope, they pulled on the rope and they were able to pull him back on to shore onto the boat and onto the deck. And just checking to see if you're paying any attention, if you're listening. And so they were able to save him. So he was saved. They were participated, but I think God had a lot to do with saving him. And I just think a really fun, interesting part of that is his posterity. Joseph Smith Jr. and Joseph Smith Sr. are direct descendants of John Howland. Also, I'm sorry, I should have looked this up because I don't want to use, there's also at least one other president of the United States that also is a direct descendant of John Howland, but several very famous people are direct descendants of his. So I just think that is just so wonderful and so cool how he almost lost his life, but because he was saved, these amazing people who did a lot for our world and our country and for us were able to be his progenitors. And so then, they arrived and, all the problems with arriving, it wasn't a simple journey. It wasn't easy. They were supposed to land far south, but they ended up in the Boston Harbor where the tide and the ship took them. Then they went out and they tried to find a place that would be suitable for them to establish. They were really looking for a place that had been established before, where there was maybe some buildings in some places. But they every time they landed, the Native Americans were, attacking them because they didn't want them to land there. And then they finally landed. They came upon a place where they found that another group of people had kind of set up, and so the land was already cleared. They had some small amount of structure that was there, and so they decided to that would be the place that they would become, which would end up becoming Plymouth, where they would establish their colony. And this was a great opportunity, great amazing thing that they could come, and then they had nothing. They landed, I believe, November 4th, but the 1st of November. Think about it. In New England, it is so cold, bitter cold. They already didn't have enough food. They were already short on supplies. And here they are. And they're ready to get off the Mayflower. They realize, okay, you know what? We've got these Puritans. We're trying to live as Christians. And then they've also got crew members. The crew intended to go back, but because of the bitterness in the winter and because they arrived late, they couldn't go back to England until spring. So here they were going to live together. And so they decided to form what we now call the Mayflower Compact. And so there wasn't really unity. There was discord, but they wanted to have some unity and concord amongst each other. So they thought it would be good to have kind of an agreement and have an association that they all agreed on, to combine in one body and to submit to some kind of government or a governance that they would have in common, that they would all agree to, and where they could choose to set at their own hand what they determined as follows would be the Mayflower Compact. So, and I know I don't like to read. It's kind of boring, but I'm going to try to make this not very long. So I am going to read the Mayflower Compact, and I would support everyone in getting out the Mayflower Compact and reading it possibly during your Thanksgiving celebration. It goes like this: in the name of God, amen. Which I think is really fun that they started out in the name of God, amen. So they meant we all agree. We whose names are underwritten, the loyal subjects of our dread sovereign Lord, King James, by the grace of God of Great Britain, France, and Ireland, King, defender of the faith, having undertaken for the glory of God and the advancement of the Christian faith and honor of our King and country, a voyage to plant the first colony in the northern part of Virginia, do by these present solemnly and mutually in the presence of God and one another, covenant and combine ourselves together into a civil body politic for our better ordering and preservation and furtherance of the ends aforesaid, and by virtue hereof to enact, constitute, and frame such just and equal laws, ordinances, acts, constitutions, and offices from time to time, as shall be thought most meet and convenient for the general good of the colony, unto which we promise all due submission and obedience. In witness whereof we have here undersubscribed our names at Cape Cod the 11th of November, in the year of the reign of our sovereign Lord, King James of England, France, and Ireland the 18th, and of Scotland the 44th, Amino Domino 1620. And so they formed the Mayflower Compact, and then they signed this document that they would all agree and live under it. Now, as time went on, as we know, it was rough. They landed, it was very difficult, very cold. They were not able to plant any crops. Food was scarce. And as we know from that first brutal winter, now, what they did is they established living in common. And we call that communism. They decided to share everything, share and share alike. Now, in the years before, in 1607, during the Jamestown settlement, they also lived in common. And we know what happened. They lived in common. They shared everything and shared it alike. And they were not able to survive. That colony did crumble, and many, many died. And no one survived really in Jamestown. And so then here it was just a few years later. Here they are, the businessmen, the London business financiers said, you know what, you will be able to live in common and it will be successful because you're Christian. So you will be able to do it and it will work. And they did try it, and they tried living in common where they shared everything. And so whatever they produced, they shared it and shared alike. So I just want you to think about what this is. We kind of do it in families. We share everything. Everything in our families is kind of shared. But except that once we go out as individuals, and especially not the mom and dad, we share everything with our children because we love them, and we love them, and we are responsible for them. But in the real world, when you share everything and you share it alike, who has the incentive to produce? If I tell my children, I want everyone to do your chores, but regardless of whether you do your chores or not, we're all going to go swimming, we're all going to go skiing, we're all going to go boating. If you get your chores done, you get to go boating. If you don't get your chores done, you still get to go boating. You get the same reward regardless of your actions. How many of our children will do their chores? I mean, maybe the first time, but will they continue to do their chores if they receive the same benefits of those who do not do their chores? This is human nature. It's natural. It's in the laws of nature, the laws of God. And so they did try this. And you know what happened is, as you all know, the first winter, more people died than survived the first winter. It was brutal, but because they suffered from, just destitute circumstances. And some of them even sold their clothes for food. Some became servants of the Indians in order to get what they needed. They were cutting wood. They would fetch water in exchange for just a handful of corn. And one story from Governor Bradford, because Governor Bradford, one of the other things I love about him is he kept a journal. He recorded almost daily what happened. So we know what happened through these days because of Governor Bradford, because he kept such an excellent record. And he said he recounted that one day, one of the settlers, when they were gathering shellfish along the shore, was so weak, he got stuck in the mud and was found dead, just stuck right there in the place. He didn't even have the strength to get himself unstuck. I mean, that just breaks your heart. That is just so heartbreaking. So he said, this system was found to breach much confusion and content and retard much employment that would have been to our benefit and comfort. The problem was that young men that were most able and fit for labor did repine that they should spend their time and strength to work for other men's wives and children without any recompense. Because of the poor incentives, little food was produced. That contributed to more than half the people in our colony dying that first winter. And he said, I realized we had to change our political system. He said, I found that I had become the tyrant we left England to get away from. We were faced with potential starvation in the spring of 1623. So I decided to implement a new economic system. Now, this was after the first governor had died from sickness and starvation. And so when that happened, then the people elected a new governor, and they elected Governor William Bradford. So he became their new governor, and he continued to implement the communism or socialism in which they lived. But then in 1623, as I said, seeing this and seeing how all these problems that he enumerated, he decided to implement a new economic system. And he said every family was assigned a private parcel of land. So this was contrary to what they had ever done and to their belief system. He gave every family a parcel of land. And he said they could then keep all they grew for themselves. Whatever they grew, whatever they produced, they could keep for themselves. Wow. This was very different than communism. They could keep for themselves. But now they alone were responsible for feeding themselves. No longer were they responsible for each other and feeding each other. It's like you have your own land, you grow, what you produce, you get to keep, and now you are responsible for feeding yourselves. I implemented a private property system and moved away from communal ownership, and it had dramatic results. Now, some may feel that this is anti to Christianity, but let me further explain how it is so Christian. He said it set the human spirit free. We went from starving to surviving to thriving in a very short time. And this is what he said. This had very good success, for it made all hands very industrious. So as much more corn was planted than otherwise would have been by any means the governor or any other could use, and saved him a great deal of trouble and gave far better content. So he said it set the human spirit free, and they had far more success. He says, I as a governor could not force them to produce. I could not have it. And he says, and that turned me into a tyrant. But he said, them having the ownership of property and being able to maintain the proceeds of their labors set the human spirits free. And then they went from not just starving, not just surviving, but to thriving. And they produced far more than they ever could have dreamed that they would ever do. The women now went willingly into the field and took their little ones with them to set or to plant corn, which before would have alleged weakness and inability, whom to have compelled would have been thought great tyranny and oppression. You could not have forced them. They would not have done it. It would be beneath their dignity. But now they had a reason to go, and they were compelled themselves to do it, and they went willingly and happily. As we celebrate, I'm trying to distinguish between the actual quotes of Governor William Bradford, but that is closed quotes for him. As we celebrate Thanksgiving this year, I would love us to remember the great abundance that we have today, and remember it is based on what some call capitalism, but I call it the free enterprise system. We now have these amazing principles that the Pilgrims discovered for themselves in a rudimentary form, and they began putting into practice 400 years ago this free enterprise system. That is one of the reasons I love Governor Bradford so much. He implemented free enterprise, which, let's reiterate what this is. Free enterprise was property ownership, keeping the rewards of your own acts and your own labors. And then, as Governor Bradford told them, you get to keep the proceeds, but if you want to trade what you have created with others and what they have created, you're welcome to do so. If you want to plant corn and you want to plant potatoes, and your neighbor plants beans and carrots, then you can now not just have corn and potatoes. Now you can have beans and carrots, because you can have an equal exchange. But as Governor Bradford said, you will create own property. You will have the proceeds of your labors to yourself. Then if you want to have an equal exchange based on a moral foundation, that is the free enterprise system. And I see that personally as different from capitalism. Capitalism is where you do have property ownership. You do get to keep the proceeds of your labors, and you do get to have an exchange of value. But it isn't necessarily based on a moral foundation. It's like, I have stuff to sell that I created. If you want to buy it, I'll sell it to you. And you get to decide if that's equal. And that's how we decide. I get to decide, I like that product. I think it was worth that, so I'm willing to pay for it. You don't think it's worth it, you don't have to buy it. And so that is the beauty of free enterprise. Capitalism, and I just think that our nation was founded from the very beginning by the Pilgrims, founded on the Bible, founded on a moral foundation. Our founding fathers also created the Constitution based on a moral foundation, which is very important. Capitalism, you can sell things, you can buy things through capitalism with or without that moral foundation. And then I'm just going to take a quick moment, since we're talking about this. I think it's important, which we do not do as principled people often, is talk about crony capitalism, which is very different from capitalism. And this is why we have so many young people embracing socialism, because it sounds Christian. Socialism sounds like, yeah, we're just going to share everything. We're going to share it alike. But it is actually contrary to the principles of Christ, because Christianity does embrace property ownership. You get to own the proceeds of your labors. The law of consecration is not sharing everything alike. It is property ownership, and you get to choose to care for each other based on your ability. The Lord said in the scriptures, if you have extra you can share, then you should. But if you are only willing to share and do not have the proceeds, you do not have extra to share, but you're willing to share, you will be blessed for your pure heart. That is Christianity. Christianity is not, we will take and force from you what is yours, rightfully yours, and will force you to share against your will with others. There is nothing Christian about that. That is communism and Marxism. Crony capitalism is when someone uses the principles of capitalism in a fraudulent manner. They are willing to sell or a commodity or a service, and they do not care. It does not have a moral foundation, and they do not care if they sell that at the very expense of the consumer, those who would pay them, or even their employees. So this would be, okay, let's use an example. Those who produce pornography, they know they are damaging those who purchase from them, that they don't care. They're producing a product that they know does not produce value, but it does damage. That's not capitalism. That's crony capitalism. Social media might have been designed to create value, but we know social media now, they are willing. There are those who produce social media that are willing. I'm not putting everyone in social media in the same basket, but I'm asking you to look and see. If social media creates value for you, does it also get you addicted? Do they create it and sell it to you or get you addicted at your own expense? Does it do damage to you? Because anything that gets you addicted is not creating value. And is it at the expense of their own consumer? And even at the expense of their own employees, those who work for them? I could say a lot of pharmaceutical companies would fit under this. Do they produce in order to produce value and create value for others? Or is it to just maybe control people and make money at the expense of those who purchase? And so, and again, I don't want to put every pharmaceutical company in the same basket, but probably almost everyone. And now we know that a lot of the food industry has been purchased by tobacco companies. Tobacco never created value for anyone. It was addictive from the beginning, and it does not create value. Although I know people think that relaxing or getting addicted, they might think. A lot of people that smoke feel like it creates value for them. I'm just going to disagree with that. It doesn't create value because it creates an addiction and it damages people. It does not serve or support people. It hurts people. And when we create value, it should create value for our consumer, for those who we sell the good or service to. So Governor Bradford, as I said, he is one of the great heroes, in my opinion, because he did establish the free enterprise system of America. So we have a lot to be grateful to him for. And as I said, once the Pilgrims at the Plymouth Plantation, once they abandoned this communal economic system and embraced the free enterprise system, look at what happened. Look at how these individual property rights, they never faced starvation again. They never struggled with starving. They all increased their standard of living. It is amazing what happened. And then they set the standard where America could really be free. Then from the time of the founders, from the time of the Pilgrims till the time of the Revolutionary War, or even prior to that, like you look at the American colonists lived in so much freedom. They literally lived free. And to the point where they were so used to and accustomed to governing themselves, but they did it on a moral foundation. And the king just allowed it until the French and Indian War. They really they lived as they wanted to. The king did not usurp power and authority. They loved the king. He was their king. They still honored him, still gave tribute to him, and paid taxes to the king. And so we are just so blessed. We have so much to be grateful for. And because we are so blessed, I would ask each of us to acknowledge the blessings that we have, and that we also have a responsibility, because much is given, much is expected. It is a time. We can't just say, oh, the election's over. We're so blessed. We have, whether you love or hate our president, we just feel like, okay, he's going to do good things to our country and we're in good shape. It's really important that we do our part, that we stand up. But I do think the greatest threat that we have today is the loss of our moral foundation, that we really have to restore our moral foundation. And that is the only way we're ever going to really be free. You cannot be free without morality. And I just want to tell about Governor Bradford. I kind of I'd like to just finish that up. He unfortunately, sadly, not long after, 2 months after they arrived, before he was even governor, his wife was on the Mayflower, because they stayed on the Mayflower for several months while they were building their homes and they built a central place, and then they built their homes individually. And while his wife was on the Mayflower, she fell from the Mayflower right into the harbor, so that water wasn't deep at all. It was very shallow, and unfortunately fell to her death. And so you can imagine poor William Bradford. I mean, here he is in this, sacrificed so much. His son's back in England. His wife is dead. You just can't imagine. It does help me through difficult times. When I have difficult times, when I have, which I have a good friend that just passed away a few days ago. And when we think about the suffering we think about our own suffering, because it's easy to think about that. I always try to think about those who went before us, who suffered greatly. And so Governor Bradford, he had his sense of pain. He had a great deal of pain, but how he overcame it. And he became the governor for almost his entire life until he died. Only 4 years before he passed away, he got reelected as the governor time and time again. And he was an amazing governor. But he did get remarried to Alice Southworth, and they ended up having 3 children, William, Mercy, and Joseph. They all survived to adulthood, and they all got married. So he left this great posterity. So that was a great blessing. And he acted as the Plymouth Commissioner for the United Colonies, and he was the president from 1652 and in 1656. But as I say, he was the governor all through those times. And then he got sick and did pass away in 1657 or 1658. And when he did die, he had over 100 books in his library. So think about that. That is pretty amazing, that 100 books in that time, that is a huge library, and that is a huge expense, and not something that not everyone would have access to. But this is one of his quotes that I absolutely love. Just as one small candle may light 1,000, so the light here kindled hath shone unto many. And that is, I think that is a great challenge for each of us, is we each have a light within us. Let's let our light light other lights and be a light. I always end my show with, remember that you're the guardian of your liberty. That's the same. Yeah, you have a light, let your light, share it, spread it out to others so that others can see your light as well. I just received notification from our next guest, who is a great Liberty mom, and we are hoping that she will be coming on. She is actually Dr. Jen Brown, and she's a dentist, but she is a doctor. Jill Biden is a doctor. Dr. Jen Brown is a doctor as well. She will be joining us a little bit late, so we're just going to go ahead and talk about other things while we're waiting for that. Oh, I just wanted to just encourage everyone. One other thing that I always do, I've done for ever since my husband and I got married and we started celebrating Thanksgiving together, we and our family have always read the Thanksgiving proclamation. So I just always also want to extend to you, sometime during your Thanksgiving festivities and when you're together with your friends and family, that you read the Thanksgiving proclamation. There are a bunch of them. There's tons of them. I just like the one from George Washington. It's just one of my favorites. I love it. George Washington was the first president to establish, based on a woman's request, multiple requests, saying we should have a day of Thanksgiving and prayer throughout the country for having our country, how the Lord has blessed us. So George Washington did write this beautiful proclamation of Thanksgiving, and I love it. And so what we do is I print it up and then I cut it up and I put one paragraph on each plate of, not every single plate because that we have more people, but you might have less people than those 13 or 14. I can't remember how many, but so each person in our family just go around and each, and those, there's little kids that can't read or don't want to participate, and those who don't want to, it's fine because we're all about freedom. That we each read a paragraph of the Thanksgiving proclamation, and that keeps people engaged, and you get more into that paragraph that you read. So I would just like to share that idea with everybody, and remember to enjoy your Thanksgiving celebration holiday. And those are some ideas of how to do it. And what I've had to learn over the years, because I do host and I do fix a lot of food, and it's real easy to get caught up in the mechanics of Thanksgiving, especially when you're in charge or you're hosting. But I just want to invite everyone to remember what it's really about. Let's be together in love and harmony and happiness. And, we all have different ideas and different beliefs. And I've heard so many people, especially on the left, say, don't get together with your family if they voted for Trump or if they voted for who you don't agree with. I would just like to invite everyone, get together with your family. This is an amazing time of healing, loving, come together. We do not need to agree. We do not need to vote as step for people in order to love each other. And, it is a good time to reflect on all the other things. We do not have to talk about politics, although I love to. We do not have to talk about politics at all. We can talk about what Thanksgiving is about, talk about the author of liberty, and how what we have to be thankful for came from God and from our Savior. And let us focus on those things. And I always think Christmas and Thanksgiving are really married to each other. They mesh, they go hand in hand. I start celebrating Christmas with Thanksgiving and just keep on giving thanks all through the Christmas season. And so let's get together with our families. I would encourage everyone to let go of any ill feelings that we're harboring, any negative feelings whatsoever. Let's just love all over each other and extend warmth and gratitude, and never let us behave badly, regardless of what happens. When other people behave badly, Let us always stand above that and be passionate and speak the truth. And no matter how much we get called bullies or get called all kinds of names, let us always stand as witnesses of Christ and behave beautifully. So I wish you a very happy Thanksgiving, and do remember that you are that light that can light thousands of other candles, and you're the guardian of your liberty. Thank you so much for being with us. And